And the other big news from this weekend's election was the loss of all four constitutional amendments. Now, voters made their voices heard on the amendments, with all four losing with at least 60% of that vote. And Royal Alexander joined us on election night to break down those amendments and joins us again tonight for a closer look at those losses. So, Royal, the four amendments failed by several thousand votes. When you look at the big difference, nearly 2/3 voted against those amendments.
They did. It was a lot of information to digest. I think most of it belongs in state law anyway and not in our state constitution. But to your point, aside from that, if you're going to present this kind of information to voters, these four amendments contain so much information, particularly Amendment 2, which was very lengthy and required voters really to digest a lot of information to try to come to a conclusion with wording that to me was not very clear. So I think when voters become confused or frustrated, they tend to vote no.
Absolutely. You're trying to understand it. You're trying to break it all down. So let's take a look at the amendments just overall. 65% voting against number 1. Now, amendment number 1 would have allowed formation of specialty courts in Louisiana with jurisdiction outside of current parish and judicial courts.
But also, in addition to specialty courts, Bisky, it also would allow for the regulation of out-of-state attorneys who are doing work in Louisiana. It's really two topics. And to me, it should be one or the other. Either put something on the amendment that's going to regulate out-of-state attorneys or do the specialty courts. But you're right. And I think voters, that was probably simpler, but the two were kind of incoherent.
So again, going back to maybe too much information into one amendment to get voters to agree or disagree with.
That's right.
All right, let's take a look at amendment number 3. Looking at my cheat sheet here, this would have made it easier to send more minors to adult jails and prisons for longer sentences. As you can see, 66% voted against amendment 3.
That really hit a nerve. We already have those 16 crimes for which people under the age of 17 can be tried as adults. I think people just said, we're not interested right now in expanding that.
Absolutely. All right, then looking at number 4, amendment number 4 also failed. This would have adjusted the rules for special elections to fill vacant or new judgeships, primarily on Louisiana Supreme Court. But again, going back to something we keep talking about, a lot of information for the voter to digest.
And what's interesting, once voters kind of decide, I'm going to vote no today, the fourth one was really kind of simple. It was, let's hold these closed primary elections on the next regular election calendar instead of some special election date that cost the state more money. That was a much simpler one to understand, but I think by the time voters got to number 4, they were just all about no.
Absolutely. And then let's go back to number 2, because there was so much in there that I feel like we have to dive in a little deeper. Now, this is one that Governor Landry was really, really pushing for. This was a big portion of his platform. So where do you think we go from here?
What's interesting, Bisky, is that there are a number of things in there that voters do support. I think they like the 3% across the board cap on taxes, that it can't go higher than 3.75%. I think most people would support seniors doubling the deduction, standard deduction for our seniors in Louisiana. So there's several things, but there's other things like narrowing the exemption for churches and nonprofits that I think worried people. I think people didn't like the fact that from now on, 2/3 of our legislature will have to approve any more tax breaks. That concerned people. What about just a simple majority? So yes, to your point.
Well, Royal, thank you for joining us again today and helping us break down these amendments and looking at the numbers.
Certainly.